A very important Excel feature that I will talk about in this lesson is the ability to select individual cells or areas of cells within a worksheet. An area of cells is also called a range of cells. It is very important to know how to select cells in all different ways because from the next lesson on, you will need to select cells all the time. So even if you find it boring to learn so many ways to do the same thing, bear with me because you will need all of them in the lessons to come. When I click on any cell, for example, I click on cell C4, then that cell is selected. Cell C4 is now selected. How do I know it's C4? As I said in a previous lesson, it shows up over here in the name box, and you can see over here the column and the row that light up, which is another indication that a cell is selected. Of course, the most obvious way to tell that a cell is selected is from the outline it gets. I will click on cell C10 and notice that this specific outline is now around cell C10. Let me remind you one more time the difference between the contents and the appearance of a cell. And the number in cell C10 is displayed in a specific format. I mean, it has the euro symbol and I can see the comma, which is the thousand separator. Now look at the formula bar. The formula bar shows the real contents. This difference is much more noticeable if I click on a cell that has a function in it. I will click on cell C15, for example, and as you can see, inside the formula bar there is a function that produces the result you see in the cell. I will double click on cell C15 to edit the value inside it, and as I said in a previous lesson, now that I double clicked inside the cell, I can edit the real content of the cell, which is what I see in the formula bar. I will deal with functions in detail in future lessons. If functions seem strange to you now, you will see later that they are pretty easy to use. I will press escape now to cancel editing cell C15. So keep in mind that it is one thing what appears on the worksheet and another thing what the actual content of a cell is inside the formula bar. When you select a cell, you can see what it truly contains if you look in the formula bar. So to simply select a cell, I just click on the cell that I want. Now, to select a range of cells, I have to press and hold the left mouse button. I will press and hold the left mouse button on the cell where I want to start, let's say on cell B2, and then I will drag to select the range I want, for example, until cell F13. I will now release the left mouse button and that area is now selected. Notice that the top left cell B2, doesn't look like it's selected. However, it's actually selected too. It just formatted that way to show you that this is where the selection started from. To unselect this range of cells, I will click anywhere on the worksheet and as you can see, the selection is removed. I will now press and hold the left mouse button on cell F2 and I will drag to cell B13 and I will release the mouse button. Now the same area is selected again, but this time the selection started from cell F2. That's why this particular cell looks like this. So when you select an area, the cell from which the selection started has this different formatting, but it is selected as well. Another way you can use to select the cells is by using the Shift key on the keyboard. I will do a single click on cell B2 and as you can see the previous selection is deselected and now only B2 is selected. I will now press Shift on the keyboard and hold it down and without letting go of the Shift key I will just click on F13, just one click, and I will now release the Shift key from the keyboard. This way I selected that whole area right away with just two clicks without having to drag the mouse. This is very convenient when I want to select the data that span through a very large area. For example, I will click again on cell B2 and I will scroll down the worksheet by turning the mouse wheel towards me. If I'm not pressing anything on the keyboard yet, okay, let's say that I want to select until cell H60, so I will now press Shift and I will just click on cell H60 and release Shift from the keyboard. I will scroll up and as you can see I have selected the entire area from B2 to H60. If I wanted to select the same area with the mouse drag method I showed earlier, I would have to press and hold the left mouse button in cell B2, drag to column H, and then drag all the way down to row 60. As you can see, it's way more difficult as I need to go up and down inside the worksheet to locate line 60 while being careful not to let go of the mouse. So for large areas, it is easier to make the selection with the Shift key. I'm sure you noticed by now that to deselect any selected area, I just need to click on any cell inside the worksheet. This action deselects that area and selects the individual cell I clicked on. There is no way to have nothing selected. Even when you deselect an area, then the individual cell you clicked on will be selected. So there will always be at least one cell selected. I will now scroll up to the beginning of the worksheet and let's see how I can select cells that are not close to each other. They are not adjacent. Let's say I want to select the cells A3, A7, C1 and C10, all 4 cells together. I will click on cell A3 and as expected I selected A3. I will then click on cell A7 and as you can see A3 is deselected and only A7 is selected. To select both cells, I will have to use the Ctrl key on the keyboard. Let's see how it is done. I will click on cell A3. I will press and hold Ctrl on the keyboard and then click on A7. This way both A3 and A7 are now selected. Without leaving the Ctrl key on the keyboard, I will click on cell C1 and now this cell is also selected together with the others. I will keep holding the Ctrl key and I will also click on cell C10 to add it to the selection range. Now that I'm done with the cells I wanted to select, I will release the Ctrl key and all 4 cells are selected. So using the Ctrl key gives me the ability to select cells that are not next to each other. Notice over here the last cell I selected, in this case C10, this cell has this different formatting from the other selected cells. When you select cells using the Ctrl key, the last cell you selected is the one that has this appearance, while when selecting with dragging the mouse or with the Shift key, the first cell of the range has this appearance. I will go one step further and I will try to select multiple ranges of cells which are not close to each other. See what I mean? I will initially select the area from A2 to F2 in the way I know, which is by clicking on cell A2, holding down the left mouse button and dragging it to cell F2. Now I want to select the range A10 to F10 and add it to the selection with A2 to F2 that I have already. So I will press and hold Ctrl on the keyboard and I will click A10. Without letting go of the Ctrl key, I will drag the mouse to cell F10 and I will release first the mouse button and then the Ctrl key. As you can see, 2 different regions are selected which are not connected to each other. One thing to watch out for this is not to hold the Ctrl key when you select the first of the ranges you want. If you do, any cell or range of cells that were already selected before will remain selected. This is a very common mistake, so I'd like to show it to you with an example. I will click on cell F1 without holding Ctrl on the keyboard, and as expected, the previous selections are deselected and only cell F1 is now selected. Now I want to select the ranges A3 to F3 and A15 to F15. I don't want the cell F1 to be part of the new selection. See what happens if I try to select them with the Ctrl key held down from the beginning. I will press and hold Ctrl and select the first range, A3 to F3. Notice that cell F1 remains selected, which of course is something I didn't want. This is a common mistake while using the Ctrl key, so remember that when you want to select cells or areas that are not next to each other, the first selection should be made without holding the Ctrl key and then use it in the following selections. So to make the selection I wanted, I will let go of the Ctrl key and without pressing it, I will click on cell A3 and I will drag my mouse up to F3. Now I will press Ctrl on the keyboard and I will click on cell A15. Without letting go of the Ctrl key, I will drag my mouse to cell F15 and I will release the mouse button and the Ctrl key. So I have now selected exactly the areas I wanted. I should say here that I can select regions and individual cells at the same time. For example, I will press Ctrl again on the keyboard and click on cells C6 and D10. Now the individual cells are also part of the selection range. Why is it so important to be able to select cells? You will see in the following lessons that selecting cells is often the first step to perform an operation. For example, if I want to change the color of some cells, I first need to select them. If I want to calculate the sum of a range of cells, I also need to select them, and so on. Therefore, the selection itself doesn't do anything, but it gives me the ability to use Excel tools and features on the selected cells. So what you need to remember from this lesson is that by clicking on a cell, I select that particular cell, and I can see in the formula bar what it actually contains. By clicking and dragging with the left mouse button, I can select a range of cells. The first cell of the range appears to be deselected while it's actually selected. It just looks like that, so I can see where I started from. If I'm interested in selecting a range of cells, a large range of cells, I can click on the cell I want to start the selection from, and while holding Shift on the keyboard, click on the last cell I want to select. That way, I can select a range of cells quite easily, and it is very useful if the range extends far down or far right in the worksheet. Lastly, if I want to select multiple areas which are not next to each other, I select the first cell or area without holding the Control key down, and then I press and hold the Control key and I select whatever else I want. That's all for this lesson. Thank you for watching.